Andrew has a consistent track record of leading world-class sales teams to exceed goals, always with a focus on strategic, consultative approaches and challenger sale mentalities to educate and elevate their clients. Welcome to the stage, Kim and Andrew.
Hello. Thanks for the intro, Danielle. Andrew, you are mute.
How could I be on mute when I so clearly know exactly? Listening to your bio, it was inspiring, and I got excited, and I was like, I think of all the things I could do in the world, and then there was mine, which I feel like could stay just is hanging. But I'm really excited to talk today. Thank you for being here. I could not figure out my virtual background either, so I'm kind of 0 for 2 right now.
All good.
So I think we'll jump right in. Based on our conversation earlier, it would not surprise me if we ran up on time, because it was a pretty fantastic conversation. But I would love to start the conversation with a little bit about yourself. So based on that bio, plus some other research that I've done, your background is phenomenal and diverse, and that makes it kind of exciting. So you spent a significant amount of time working across different categories in the space: CPG, tech, healthcare, different practices, agencies, and most recently on the brand side. But you also studied international politics and economics in school. And so I'm always curious about how people got into marketing if they didn't study marketing. And I was wondering if you can share a little bit about how you got from there into this path.
Sure. I mean, that goes way back in time. But first of all, pleasure to be here and be among such incredible agenda of marketers today. And yeah, I mean, as far as my career trajectory, I would say that it's not necessarily a normal path for marketers. But I think that's also what has set me up to take some leaps in my career over different chapters. Studying international politics and economics was very much due to a passion of having a global mindset. Lived abroad in China for many years, have always been sort of a strategic forward marketer. And I think a lot of that was garnered through thinking about the disciplines of political science and economics. And then also my MBA in global management is, being strategically minded, being data-driven, being solution-oriented, and also driving dialogue, right? Meeting people where they are, and putting yourself in other people's shoes, whether that's as a diplomat or as a marketer. You still need that in order to broker relationships at the end of the day, as well as, borrowing best practices, and bringing the outside in, not being myopic, taking an approach of diversity of thinking, which is something I'm personally very, very passionate about, and I think is critical to being a good marketer, regardless of the discipline and the industry.
Yeah, I think that's so fascinating, especially the diversity of thought, working in right now just a purely innovative industry and bringing a lot of innovation to that industry. But also, even just with your previous experience, the challenges of bringing a diversified portfolio to market, understanding the complexities of story building across that. It's really interesting to hear how it ties back to what you learned and what you experienced in, with those studies, and then ultimately in that role, which is fascinating. So moving into your career path, which went from your role in China, helping facilitate media companies' entry into that market, which is an entire different conversation that I want to have that could last 2 hours. How have you thought about your career trajectory? How did you go from one place to another? I'm specifically curious about the jump from the Boston Beer Company to GoodCell, because I think there's a story there. But also just kind of in general, I think it's helpful for people to understand how people in your position have made these decisions. If you think about product and purpose and leadership, what do you factor in when you're thinking about your own career?
Yeah. So I would say the red thread in my career over time has been, I guess, digitally minded, right? So even in the mid 90s, when I was working in China doing government relations, it was all about navigating the internet regulation on behalf of Western media companies. and helping, China diversify its approach to media. And then that led to how I did that for agencies back in the US. So helping agencies that were more traditional in their approach and designing digital centers of excellence to drive not only more revenue opportunities for the agency, but also to help clients diversify their approach and how they're reaching their stakeholders. And all that sort of required, whether it was living in China and dealing with the government to, working with clients across different industry verticals, from healthcare to a lot in tech as well. And then ultimately also CPG, helped me understand what it takes to drive growth. And, as a marketer, you have to understand what drives growth. And obviously digital really is no longer just a channel. It's just the way it is, right? There used to be roles that were, head of digital was former roles for me, but now to be a head of marketing, a CMO, whatever is the title, it's intrinsic, right? In what we do as marketers. So I think roles have evolved just as the industry has evolved. But having been on the agency side over 20 years prior to going to Boston Beer Company, I love being able to pivot and shift gears every day, going from one, industry vertical to another. But I also always felt I was skimming the surface, and made a decision to go in-house just so I could be more embedded in the day-to-day and understand the impact of execution on the business. And you can only see that from the inside. So even though I didn't have beer experience, when I met Jim Cook, he's the founder of Boston Beer, and specifically Samuel Adams too. I said, hey, I've got no beer. I have no beer experience. And he's like, that's a good thing. Bring the outside in from your days at P&G and healthcare and tech in order to help us think differently rather than just looking at the competitive set. And I had an amazing 4 years there. Really, enjoyed working with brands that are well established to new brands from, Truly Hard Seltzer that was in its infancy when I joined and is now larger than Samuel Adams. And, built the digital capabilities there. A few years ago, Samuel Adams and the Boston Beer Company was a little more traditional in its approach, but as it was diversifying its portfolio, it needed to figure out how to take a more digital first approach to marketing to meet consumers where they are, and also less of a product and sales led approach to more of a brand driven approach, to drive affinity and a reason to believe, and building brands for me in order to get people to drive. You have to drive the pull. We were great at the push, but we had to drive the pull. And the only way to do that is to be a brand that stands out. So that worked. Truly, now is the leader in most of the hard seltzer market. Up against White Claws was also the one that we were competing against. So and then I decided, I wanted to make a pivot again and get into my entrepreneurial roots. Always been a builder. So that is, whether on the agency side or at Boston Beer, building capabilities from the ground up is something that I'm very passionate about. And I find exhilarating, both intellectually interesting, but also being a pioneer. And maybe China kind of gave me that experience in my DNA. But I decided to go into the biotech space because I really enjoyed the work that I did in the healthcare and technology space prior to Boston Beer. And I'm in the Boston area. So biotech has been exploding in the last few years. And I decided to take a leap and join GoodCell, which is a startup. But for me, I sort of always taken an approach to being a startup where I've been in my career. So that's the red thread. It's not as much of a leap. In some ways, Boston Beer is an anomaly for me in my career trajectory.
Yeah, but even with that, I think it's so rare. It's very common for leaders, founders, executives to talk about diversity of thought and wanting to incorporate it into either the management structure or just staffing. But it's much less common where it actually happens.
Right.
Hire for some specific role with some specific experience. So it sounds like you found, even though it was an anomaly in terms of the trajectory, it sounds like you found a very like-minded leader.
Yeah.
Which is fantastic, yeah.
Well, organization is very founder-led too, which is something that I think is critical, is to be able to be in lockstep with those who are driving the vision of the company, no matter what the size is.
Yeah, and an innovative spirit, not resting on one skills, but finding new opportunities, developing new products like Truly that service a market that needs to be serviced. And watching how it grows. And it's just so fascinating. I find such a common thread with successful, I want to say successful women because I had another conversation earlier today, but successful people, where it is that operator mindset, that builder mindset, that entrepreneur, and then being able to apply those skills and that practice and that mindset to an emerging category. And then we see this growth. And we see that. That's very exciting. So jumping into, I want to talk about GoodCell. I'd like to talk about just the category a little bit first. And I'm curious if you can just sort of, GoodCell, a huge part of the value that GoodCell is bringing and the change that it's supporting and providing is in this idea of personalized healthcare. Can you talk a little bit about the idea of personalized medicine, how you see it improving healthcare now, improving patient outcomes now, but also where you see it going in the next few years?
Yeah, I mean, in many ways, I think we've talked a lot over the last year on, COVID accelerants, right? But it's very true in the healthcare industry in particular, and specifically digital health. But the consumer mindset has continued to shift to have more agency over their own health. So that leads to, where I think the healthcare industry is going and where GoodCell is at the epicenter of what I call the 4 Ps. So you mentioned personalized, but also proactive, preventative, and precision. And those are all meaningful in different streams of healthcare, everything from what you're seeing, Apple doing to Amazon doing even, and CVS with their health hubs in terms of giving individuals more control over their health, as well as, making healthcare more attainable, more approachable, more equitable. And equitable, I mean anything from cost of entry, approachability of those services to also representation of, ethnic backgrounds and diversity in research and diversity in how treatments are coming into the marketplace. So, for me, we've been doing at GoodCell a lot of cultural intelligence to understand how we can provide added value to the marketplace. And it's not just about, for those who don't know GoodCell, I mean, you wouldn't, we're brand new, we're just rolling into the marketplace, but we basically identify, track, and mitigate health risks. And we do that through a combination of genetic testing, health screening, and personal biobanking. And ultimately, we provide health insights that are very actionable in order for you to take action today, but also get ahead of your health by storing your stem cells for potential future use should you need it for cell therapy. And we're seeing a huge, a massive increase in clinical trials on cell therapies. And you see, back to the COVID accelerants, I mean, look what Moderna has done, look what the mRNA, field has done, look at where we are in treatments coming onto the marketplace. And it's all coming to speed to market much faster, right? Old trends in healthcare are being broken. And it's about taking science forward. So we talk about today's science becoming tomorrow's medicine. And that is literally true today.
So much I want to dive into there. We touched on, you touched on the democratization of access to this sort of future forward concept of personalized healthcare and overall. So I'm going to jump around a bit, but I kind of want to just talk about that for a second. You also talked about how important a founder-led culture is. And so I'm curious, where does purpose live at GoodCell? The technology is the market fit and the need is massive. I'm curious, like, where does purpose live? And go into as much detail as possible there. I'd love it, because I feel like it always looks like to talk about, but it feels like you guys live that pretty openly.
Yeah, we have to. I mean, it's not atypical for an early stage startup to be mission driven, but we really are. I mean, our mission is to empower individuals to live longer and healthier lives. And if we can't provide that value, then we're not doing our jobs. because that is our value proposition. Our vision in terms of where we want to be is to help revolutionize, personalized health. So ideally in 5-10 years, we can say members of GoodCell have, added years to their life or life to their years by X% because they were able to get more ahead of health risks that were coming down the pipe and they didn't even know it. So, there's a lot that's happening in the genetic space, for example, and, thanks to major players, there's a baseline understanding of that, but having it be attainable in a way where it's extremely medically actionable and can help broker more intelligent conversations with, say, your healthcare provider and your physician, that's another story. And so we're trying to put that data in the hands of the consumer in order to drive more intelligent decisions about their health and be more proactive versus reactive. We've done a lot of proprietary research, but only 1 in 5 Americans go and see their GP on an annual basis. And out of those, only about a third get standardized, blood testing for like HbA1c and lipids, which, those are easy tests to do. It's just a matter of it not being standardized. But if you knew that early on, you could have a more proactive discussion versus reactive discussion with your physician. Yeah. Or if you knew, what your genetic predispositions are. So 50% of inherited breast cancer goes undetected, which is unnecessary. It's just where the guiding principles are for monitoring. And if you knew earlier in your life that you had such a predisposition, you would start monitoring for them sooner.
Yeah. Yeah, it feels like so much of what is positively disruptive in the healthcare industry is the advent of simplicity, the advent of control, not thinking of it so abstractly, obtusely obfuscated in terms of this is the domain I will see once every 6 months or so, but something that you can know about yourself that you can take control of.
That's right. Yeah, and you mentioned simplicity. That's something that as we did some cultural intelligence to inform our platform, and this goes back to your previous question, Andrew, we've affectionately coined the term simplexity in partnership with some of our agency partners who helped us do some of this research. And it's about simple tech, but how do you make the complex digestible? So for us, that's extremely relevant because most people have not heard of the idea of personal biobanking, even though when you say, okay, cord blood banking, for example, think of that for adults. And like, oh, okay. But it takes a high lift of education, and plus the combination of data that we're looking at can be overwhelming. It's our job to deliver it in a way that is digestible and actionable. And so our platform is meant to be extremely user-friendly and take that approach of simple tech.
There's one other thing that I want to just add, which we talked about earlier, which I think is so important and brings it from sort of purpose as a nice idea into purpose and practice, which is the price point of a GoodCell member is attainable. It feels very much like something that is not for the wealthiest of the wealthy who are getting vitamins at 130 years old. But is something that is supposed to live in every pocket of the country, if not the world, and create this opportunity for people to know more than they know now, to understand more than they understand now. And then the second, third, fourth order impacts of that are just astounding because there's so much that happens after people get a better understanding of the things that they can do to live a healthier life.
That's right.
That was really, really great.
Yeah, and that's also we're FSA and HSA eligible, which we feel is crucial, right, in order to make it just that much more attainable. And with those who are insured, that it makes it all the more even approachable. But I think the attainability piece is a mix of both price point as well as accessibility, right? So there's not much a member has to do except go and get one simple blood draw, and then we take care of the rest. And then you really just need to know how to log into a dashboard like you would with any health portal. And then you have your information at your disposal. But I think the attainability too is making that empowerment feel real. And so that's where also transparency on the security and privacy of your data is really, really critical. So building that trust with the member for us is first and foremost.
Yeah. So let's condense all that into, because I'm also very curious, the company itself is impressive is a bad word, but there's so many exciting things happening within walls and in this space. But then there's the question as a marketer, how do you synthesize that? How do you tell that story and what to focus on and which cohorts to lead with what message? So can you just broadly, can you talk about how you approached that challenge? There's it's a big country. There's a lot of different pockets. COVID, obviously, the pandemic has impacted the way that people think about their own personal health, credibility in the healthcare system so much. So what's the starting point for how to bring this brand to life?
Right. Yeah. So, before we actually embarked on brand building, we did a segmentation analysis. And so that helped us. We surveyed over 1,000 adults in the United States who were educated. So there were a couple of filters that we put on because we had to make some assumptions in terms of anyone who wanted to be proactive about their health and buy a similar service, right? They have a certain level of education, and I think the household income was not as important, we're realizing in the end, but it was key to also a life stage. So we made the assumption out of this segmentation analysis, it really came to bear that we're talking about people probably mostly in their late 20s till their mid 40s, but all the way up till their mid 60s, who are seeking to better understand their health risks and get ahead of them. And that means maybe also probably having a family or planning a family. And the addressable market that came out of that segmentation analysis was, about 35 million and above, which is not small. And also, if you look at the HSA and FSA populations independently, those are also very large populations. So, right now, as we're rolling into the marketplace, we're beginning to see that traction hold true in terms of what we call sort of the healthy Hannah and trendy techie Teds of the world. And, those are the personas that we've built. We're seeing that begin to actually come to bear. Those that, really are digitally forward, tech savvy, and want to embrace more knowledge about their health.
Yeah, there's also the FSA, HSA piece of it.
Yeah.
As a human who has done a bad job of leveraging that Nvidia card that I have, towards the end of the year, it's like, like I has to go somewhere. So I imagine that's some exciting tailwinds to find. I am curious, like you started with GoodCell around the start of the pandemic. As we've gone through from the lockdown to the kind of midway point into vaccines and the Delta, has the approach changed? I know you're not, like full force in market right now, so it's not like you had to kind of adapt in that way exactly, but has that impacted how the segmentation strategy, what you guys plan to do? Has that been a factor?
Yeah, it gave us certainly more purpose, that's for sure. Right back to the beginning of the conversation, we really felt like, wow, okay, we're able to provide value in an age that needs it. And so, all the trends that we were seeing gave us tailwinds to work against. And then, we've been, also working on our IP that is very much related to understanding risk. There's work that we've been doing with the New York Blood Center and looking at what are markers that can indicate, susceptibility to severe disease and specifically pathogens like COVID. And these are the kinds of things that science can promise to, evolve and help people have more control over decisions they make, like, okay, should I be a frontline worker? Should I get vaccinated? All of these ways in which we can consider how to deploy resources, right, against treating those most in need. So I think, having that idea of susceptibility to pathogens is something that is relatively unknown, but we're poised to help sort of drive development in that space.
Do you think about partnerships and frenemies in the space where there are companies like CVS that are much more focused on like primary care at this point? I know there's a lot of pharma companies that use that kind of in-store real estate to commit to push people to get vaccines. Do you think about partnerships in that way of how, because there are so many real world applications and real world, do you think about like, how can you get the word out as quickly as possible, given that there's some like real time things that can be done to improve quality of life and also save lives.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of partnerships underway. We also have a growing affiliate channel. So we work with a lot of benefit administrators who are promoting us to their populations. So, for them, it is all about driving better health outcomes and also reduce healthcare costs for their populations.
Yeah.
So we have arrangements with them that, gives us access to their population and is a win-win, right? Whereby, over, the period in which they are working with their participants, they're seeing improved outcomes on, how they're approaching their health.
Yeah. What do you think of as the biggest challenges to telling this story? Is it like a news cycle, especially amongst more educated people, where there's so many new developments in healthcare, and Amazon, Walmart, Apple, CVS, big pharma? Is it the noise, but is it just the kind of influx there? Is it hesitancy due to just general mistrust of healthcare systems among certain populations? Like, what are the biggest challenges for you to tell the story?
I mean, the science is complicated, right? So personal biobanking in and of itself is sort of, a new term that people scratch their heads against, and is more known within sort of the academic and research field. Because, the larger organizations like the Mayo Clinics of the world, they all have biobanks, but they're primarily used for research or for even, if someone needed a stem cell transplant, right? There are banks available for donation. But the notion of having personal banks of your own cells is relatively new. And it doesn't feel, there doesn't seem to be urgency, right? From a consumer point of view, like, oh, I'm not currently sick, why do I need that? So the idea of putting your, biomaterials away for, future use is confusing for people. But when you tie it to urgency of understanding your health risk today, and so the process of doing your, banking your materials gives us those materials to test on what your risks are today so that you can start getting ahead. So it's all part of the same process. It's just a matter of how do you say that in simple layman's terms, right? Where people have like the aha and I get it. And that's where we lead with, more digestible information. Like, did you know that there are 88 million people who are pre-diabetic and 80% of them don't know it, or 50% of inherited breast cancer is undetected. And then, oh my gosh, am I one of those people? So trying to put it into context of the here and now is what we're seeing working quite well. But we'll see. I think it's going to be, an ongoing challenge of that mistrust as well, because that is definitely pervasive in the industry. And that's why, like I said earlier, building trust with our members is critical. And so we take a very high touch customer service approach. Everyone who becomes a member of GoodCell has a dedicated member relationship manager that is their one-on-one relationship and walks through every process, every step of the way, and is there to answer questions at any time. And we've gotten a lot of really incredible feedback in terms of that service and how meaningful that has been to onboard people onto GoodCell.
Yeah, that's wonderful to hear. Again, bringing something this impactful and is built to be so broadly accessible is, I think, where the most exciting part of it is, at least as I see it. And I'm very happy that you brought to bear your years of experience to building this and releasing it. I mean, again, if the pandemic taught us anything, it's that there are a lot of ways for us to do good work and build good businesses. And it's really exciting what you guys are doing. So we're at time. I didn't see any questions, but I just wanted to say thank you. This is really fun. I have 1,000 more things I'd like to ask you, but I'm pretty sure I'm supposed to stop now.
Well, thank you very much. This is a great session, and it was an honor to be here.
And thanks so much.
Okay.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.
Today definitely has been filled with such thought-provoking segments, and there's still so much more to come. Please welcome Erin Levzow, Vice President of Marketing Technology for Del Taco Restaurants. Prior to her current role, Erin was the CMO for Marcus Hotels and Resorts. She has also served as Vice President of Customer Relationship Marketing loyalty, and marketing for Hathaway, a customer service experience company specializing in helping billion-dollar brands develop mobile-first strategies. Our moderator is Michelle Myler, West Coast Regional Sales Manager at Premion. Michelle leads sales efforts for Premion's OTT advertising platform in the Western region. She was awarded Seller of the Year in 2020 and has a proven track record of driving revenue, leading attribution sales strategy efforts, and implementing new internal processes across teams. Welcome to the virtual stage, Erin and Michelle.
Thank you so much, Dania. I think